When I first used some of these plugins, I was blown away by how useful they were. But as time's gone on and I've thought more about them, I'm starting to notice that these plugins are ruining mixing. Now, if you've been using modern intelligent plugins or you're curious about them and you're thinking about buying some, stick around. This video is going to be a little different than what I normally do, but I want to share some important info about these plugins so that the mixes and the projects that you work so hard on can sound as good as possible. Real quick, we have a new membership. New members get 10 free mastered songs so your next release can sound as good as possible. You also get unlimited feedback on your mixes from us and our community members to get a lot of helpful perspectives quickly, and you get in-depth educational courses to learn both the fundamentals and the nuances of audio engineering. So there's going to be more on this at the end of the video. Let's start with, what are intelligent processors? Well, intelligent processors typically take the form of some AI processing or a plugin with a complex behind-the-scenes algorithm that determines how your signal will be processed. For example, the Gullfoss EQ uses a hidden preset frequency response to determine how it should attenuate or amplify various frequencies in the mix. The idea being, the signal you feed into it will constantly be shaped to create a balanced sound.
These lights go down for no one, burning on a neon sign.
And if you're like me, when you first either saw or you tried some of these plugins, you thought, this is amazing, this is going to save me so much time. But after using this for about a year, I can say with all honesty that these plugins have been making my mixes worse. So let's talk about why that is. Now, first, they make everything dull. So whether it's the Gullfoss EQ, Soothe 2, or iZotope's AI Assist, I'm noticing how dull they're making mixes. For example, Soothe 2 measures and attenuates resonances that have become too aggressive. But what is too aggressive? Well, too aggressive or unbalanced is determined by the developers of these plugins, not by you, the person mixing the song. Now, I'm sure that their algorithms are well designed, but that doesn't mean they'll actually augment your mix. For example, say I have a vocal that has resonances in the mids. Now, any good mixing engineer is going to tell you, don't EQ these out. You could adjust them, but trying to notch every unique aspect of the vocal that doesn't fit into a preconceived notion of balanced is a really bad idea.
These lights go down for no one, burning on a neon sign.
Now, why is it a bad idea? Because removing unique aspects of the vocal doesn't take into account the interaction of the vocal with other instruments, or maybe how a particular genre allows vocals to behave in distinct ways. A rock vocal could have distortion in the mid-frequencies that sound great, but what does Soothe 2 think? It's going to remove them to recreate its predetermined balanced sound.
These lights go down for no one, burning on a neon sign. Let's shake hands, I'm moving it.
So what we get is combative processing, in which one processor is trying to take out what another one adds. And in the end, we either get an overprocessed sound or worse, a boring sound. At least Soothe 2 lets us adjust the emphasis bands, which could help us avoid unwanted attenuation. But this problem is made even worse with something like the Gullfoss EQ that offers much less control. Let's talk about another problem though, which is that they make decisions in solo. Now by that, I mean they measure only the individual signal, not the signal combined with everything else. Now to be fair, these plugins do allow for sidechaining signals, which lets the plugin measure competing signals and more or less make decisions in the context of the mix. But few people are using these plugins in that way. More often than not, they're kind of slapped on a signal, adjusted slightly, and then they're left as is. So without an external signal, how does the plugin take masking into account? Does its preset algorithm determine how multiple frequencies in the mix are going to interact, or is it simply adhering to its algorithm? If I was to mix a vocal soloed, then add it back into the mix, it's not going to sound the same way that it does alone. So with that in mind, how accurate could the plugin's measurement actually be if it doesn't interact with all of the relevant instrumentation? The only way that the plugin could accurately determine how frequencies will interact with it is by sidechaining the rest of the mix when affecting any signal. So if I was to use the Gullfoss EQ on the guitar bus, I'd need a stereo signal with everything except the guitars to make its predetermined measurement actually accurate. Now, maybe this could work for something like only vocals on top of a beat, but in other situations, I really don't see this being a reasonable way to approach a mix. Additionally, if we do use it on a vocal and a sidechained instrumental or a beat, we encounter the same previous problem. That is, it can't take the genre, the feeling, or any intricate or complex ideas into account when adjusting the signal. I could be wrong, but listen to this vocal being attenuated with the beat sidechained, and can you honestly tell me that the processed version sounds better, or is the vocal just tamed and made kind of boring?
These lights go down for no one, burning on a neon sign. Let's shake hands, I'm moving it. This is life on the borderline.
Next up, I don't want to get too negative, but sometimes these plugins can make horrible decisions. So far we've been talking about the Gullfoss EQ and Soothe 2, which are two plugins that I ultimately think are really well designed and could be very useful, but they're just often misused, or they're used as if they're going to fix a mix's problems without much additional effort. But when it comes to Ozone's AI Assist, the more popular I see it becoming, the more I felt the need to adamantly warn about how terrible it can make a mix or a master. So for example, I was curious if it was smart enough to know if a track had already been mastered. So I imported an EDM track and I clicked the Assistant tool. Now I promise you, this was literally the first time I clicked it too. I wasn't looking for an instance where it did something wrong, but it said that the EDM track was reggae and it equalized it to match that genre. It made it all primarily mono. It attenuated in-key frequencies that had previously given it a musical sound. And then finally, it decided to limit it by an additional 10 dB, resulting in attenuation up to 8 dB at points and an integrated LUFS of -5. Now, nothing ever needs to be that loud, but that decision is made even more interesting since the AI Assist is supposedly optimizing the track for streaming services that use loudness normalization. Now, I doubt that people are going to feed mastered tracks into this processor too often, but the fact that it can't measure a track's loudness prior to introducing processing, nor can it accurately identify a genre or make any decisions that make musical sense, really makes me wonder why people would ever trust this plugin with something that they've worked so hard on. Now, this kind of brings me to my last point, which is we need to be more confident. These plugins have exploded in popularity, and for Soothe 2 and Gullfoss, I've previously said that these were great plugins and how they've helped me salvage bad mixes. But are they actually helping me? Or are they just making it so I don't have to make difficult decisions when I'm mixing? Now, the more engineers I talk with, the more I realize how many talented engineers completely underestimate how talented they are. And if we're all constantly led to believe that our mixes are bad, of course we're going to reach for a plugin that promises to fix everything for us. But your mixes aren't bad. The unique aspects of them are, well, unique, and they keep the production interesting, and they ensure that things don't all start to sound the same. All of this to say, next time you try to insert Soothe 2 or Gullfoss or, God forbid, Ozone to use the Assistant, ask yourself, does this plugin really understand my mix better than I do? As audio engineers, we want to fulfill our creative potential. We want to know how to achieve a sound quickly and efficiently without having to second-guess ourselves or endlessly revise a production, mix, or master. Having mastered thousands of tracks over the past 20-plus years, we know how important it is to put your best foot forward as an engineer or an artist, but what's even more important is having the resources and the knowledge to create your best work. Now that's why we created the Sage Audio Membership, a collective space where you could have your tracks mastered, engage with a thriving community, and learn the skills you need to take your project from start to finish and be happy with the final result. Now, a membership like this is nothing without a strong community. That's why we're giving 10 free masters to every new member. Our goal is to have as many engineers as possible, sharing their ideas, providing feedback on each other's mixes and masters, and helping to build a place where anyone can learn. To give our members a great foundation for successful projects, we created a 4-hour-long mastering course, starting with fundamentals and ending with mastering chains for specific genres. So far, we've seen and heard great results, with both new engineers and seasoned ones noticing a huge improvement in their mastering. Now, a mixing course will be released next, with more in-depth courses to follow. Now, in the past, you probably shared your mixes and your masters with some friends and fellow musicians while piecing together often conflicting info from across the internet to try and improve your productions. But with this membership, you have the option to receive feedback on your mixes and your masters from multiple engineers, including Sage audio engineers. At the same time, you could learn from a coherent, logical, and to-the-point source, giving you the tools that you need to take your productions to a new level. Meanwhile, you could have us master your tracks with your 10 included free masters, as well as 5 additional mastering credits that you'll receive each month. Furthermore, you'll have access to mixed tracks for mastering practice, raw sessions for mixing practice, start-to-finish mixing and mastering chain templates, and plugin presets designed by us. Right now, we're offering a 70% discount for the full membership, bringing the monthly total down to $15. This price is locked in. It won't go up for as long as you're a member. So sign up today to receive your discount and 10 free masters. We're excited to see what you create, and we can't wait to help along the way.